Our application is coming along really nicely. However, we don't have the ability to click on a particular item, or if we even did, we don't have any kind of form that we could click on an item and edit it, or even go and create a new one. So this is what we want to achieve in this chapter, is to hook up the ability to create the definition for a new product. So we can choose an icon, we can create a name, we can add a price, whether it's in a promotion or not, save things out, and then pass that data eventually off to a server, which is then going to save things in our local database. So this is the idea. Now what we're going to do is, inside of our containers and our components folders, we're going to create two new components. The first is going to be a new container component, which we're eventually going to tie up to some routing. And then we're also going to create a DOM form component, the donut-form. This is then going to allow us to create a new product and then add this to our data structure. We're then going to look at tying in some services, how to tie in some immutability, hooking things up to real HTTP requests, and so much more. So there's lots to come in the course, and I'm really excited to now take you through some of the more advanced concepts and the chapters. And this is going to start with us creating a really nice form, and we're going to try and explore and incorporate as many form elements and ideas as we can. So if we jump into our second terminal instance, we're going to turn to npx, ng, and then generate. We, of course, are going to create a new component. It's going to be in our admin. First off, we're going to create our containers, and then this is going to be the donut-single. Now I'm going to call this a single item because it's going to be when we click on a particular donut, it's then going to take us through. We won't be hooking up the routing just yet. We'll leave that for last. So we'll gradually compose our components separately and then tie them all together with some really nice routing at the end. We can then hit enter. This is then going to generate our component, our donut single, and it's also added it, if we command and click, to our admin module. Now at this point, we start to also have lots of different imports. And one of the practices I like to use is splitting them out like so. So we can say containers and then components. We can then take our donut card component, because you can see the folder name here is /components, and the other two are containers. And we can just separate them. If we need to go and jump into our admin module, everything is nice and visible. And as our application expands, we'll then have our services. We can then have guards, which is an advanced topic which we'll come on to in the next course. Similarly, with custom directives, we'll be building out all of these. So you can see how by starting up front, by organizing our modules, it can make our files very nice and neat. If we want to, we can also go down and reorder our declarations, just so they follow the exact same suit as above. So we have the list, single, and then the card, list, single, and then card. So these are just nice practices that I like to use on my codebase. Now, at the moment, we're using exports. We're using that donut list component. So now I also want to export our donut single component. You may be asking why. If we hit save and then go into our app component, we no longer need our donut list. We're going to change this over to our donut-single. And we are now going to start working on this donut single component. But the problem is, if we jump into our containers, we have donut list, donut single, and our component, we don't have any forms. Before we start going and coding forms and having different imports and start tying in and complicating our component, we're going to, from the get-go, start to break things down into our components. So this is going to be a DOM form component. We're going to say ng-generate. I want to create a new component in our admin/components folder. And this is then going to look in our donut-form. We can then hit enter. This is then going to spawn up a components. We have our donut card, donut form, an empty file definition, but inside of our admin module, we now have our containers, and the Angular CLI has very nicely added this into our components declarations, as well as in our ng module. So we can close this off. We don't need our donut form just yet, but we're going to now declare inside of our donut single our form. So first I'm going to wrap things in a container div, because this is a nice practice. We can then say donut-form. So this is going to, when we hit save, render out purely just a form component. If we jump into our DevTools, we then have our container component. So this is going to be in charge of communicating with the services. Think about our form. We don't want to just create random components. We want to think about the roles of the components. So the role of our donut single component is to talk to a service, which is why we are creating a container. So you can kind of think, are we going to use it for routing? Yes. Are we going to use it with a service to later make some HTTP requests? Yes. Does the donut form need to worry about that? Absolutely not, which is why it's a dumb component. So we're going to have some events from our donut form. We're going to have a create event, a save event. We can then have an update. We can also have a delete. And what this will then allow us to do is go into one of our products, delete it. We can also create one from scratch, which we're going to build first, and then incorporate the ability to edit an existing one. And the interesting piece is we're going to use the same form. So this is why it's important that we break things out in a component. Because if we want to use a different URL or a different container component, we can just drop in our donut form and everything will just work for us out of the box. So we're going to leave it there for this lesson. The whole idea behind this lesson is to get you thinking more like an Angular developer that is a master of the component architecture paradigms. We want to think about the roles of our components. Yes, we need to create a new product, but we don't just create a component and then go for it and see where we end up. We want to, from the beginning, say, okay, what is the role of this particular view, this page? The idea here is to view a particular product. So that means we're going to be dealing with a single piece of our data, whereas we've got an array. So this single item is going to be focusing on these particular fields. We're going to have our ID, our name, icon, price, promo. So there's lots of form fields that we can create to then tie these into Angular to allow us to create them from scratch or edit an existing one. Like I mentioned, if we want to use the donut form in multiple places, all we then need to do is then simply declare it anywhere in our application and things are going to work for us out of the box. So that's the thinking behind these components. We've created our new container, we've created our new component, and this is actually a really exciting chapter where we're going to start bringing our data to life via some user input. With this in mind, let's jump into building out some forms.